Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Janice Holloway used to look at Bruce with affection. He was a good man, and no one could deny that. Hard-working, loyal, a present husband who made an effort to keep the house in order and their lives within a comfortable routine. Almost every night, he prepared the tea she liked before going to bed. He remembered the details, the important dates, made it a point to compliment her hair even when she herself didn't see anything special about it in the mirror. But over the years, what had once been enchanting began to seem too predictable. She caught herself looking back on the past with a quiet longing. She remembered their first encounters, the calls that kept them awake, the passionate messages, the stolen kisses in the street. Their marriage, solid and respectful, had turned into a sequence of tasks and obligations. Dinner, TV, bills, grocery shopping, medical appointments, retirement planning. Bruce never changed with her, but Janice felt something inside her had changed. Something she couldn't quite explain. It was as if part of her had been asleep for years, and suddenly started waking up, demanding attention, beating strongly like a forgotten heart. It started slowly. First were scattered thoughts, then unavoidable comparisons. She saw younger couples on the street and thought about how things had been different in the past. Then came curiosity. Was she still desired? Still noticed? Still able to spark interest in someone who didn't know her whole story, who didn't see her only as a wife or mother? These questions didn't stay in her head for long, but they returned at specific moments, like when she looked in the mirror before leaving for work or when she received an unexpected compliment from someone she knew. It was during a business trip that everything really began. Janice attended a conference in Denver and, during lunch, sat next to a colleague from another branch, a few years younger. He struck up a conversation, complimented her necklace, commented on her good taste in clothes. The conversation stretched out, wine helped, and by the end of the night, she accepted his invitation to go to the hotel bar. Nothing happened that day, but the feeling of being seen again, of sparking curiosity in someone, was enough to make her start sending messages to him a few days later. Soon after, the two met again. This time, there was no hesitation. Janice felt alive again. That's how she described it to herself while hiding messages, deleting records, changing passwords on her phone. Guilt came, of course, but it was smothered by an internal justification. It was just a moment. A one-time mistake. Nothing that would change what she felt for Bruce. And she believed that. Believed that love and betrayal could coexist. That the desire for novelty was human. That she deserved it after so many years of dedication to the same person, the same life. That first experience served as an entrance door. Soon came other conversations, other meetings, other names. She created strategies to fit the meetings into her schedule, used last-minute meetings as an excuse, invented company events, faked tiredness to justify absences. Bruce never suspected anything. He remained the same man as always, kind, helpful, completely trusting the woman he had shared his life with for almost 3 decades. And this, paradoxically, made Janice feel even more suffocated. The more he treated her well, the more she questioned what she was doing. But it was just for a second. After that, she surrendered to the idea that she needed to experience more, live more, reconnect with a part of herself that had been forgotten among the pots, the bills, and the silent routines. There was a day when, coming out of a meeting with a man she had met at a networking event, she passed through a park and saw an elderly couple sitting on a bench. He held her hand gently, as if it was the most precious thing in the world. That image destabilized her from within. Because, for a brief second, Janice saw herself and Bruce in that couple. Saw what they were building, what they were losing. But she shook her head and pushed that thought away. Told herself that she was still young, that she still had time, that all of this wasn't final. In the following days, she met a literature teacher, then a nice widower from Chicago who traveled a lot for work. Each new face brought a momentary excitement, a rush of adrenaline that filled the empty spaces she avoided facing. It was always the same thing: conversation, curiosity, compliments, meetings, secrets. The pattern repeated itself, but she pretended it was new. When someone started to get too attached, she pulled away. The game only worked while the connection was light, while it didn't involve demands, while it maintained that illusion of freedom without consequences. Janice believed she was in control. That she would never let her double life slip through the cracks. That what she did behind closed doors with other men had no direct relation to the love she claimed to feel for Bruce. But what she didn't know, or pretended not to know, is that every lie, sooner or later, loses strength in the face of truth. And that a castle built on the sand of omission doesn't resist the first wave of revelation. She came home, had dinner with Bruce, watched the same shows, listened to his work stories. She even helped him choose a gift for his brother-in-law, laughed when he burned the rice trying to cook a surprise dinner. On the outside, she was the perfect wife. Inside, an exhausted actress playing a role that no longer made sense. But she continued. As if fate would never demand payment. As if the game had clear and eternal safe rules. As if it was possible to live between two worlds without falling in the middle along the way. And she would have continued like that, indefinitely, until someone watched her too closely. Until a word slipped out of the wrong mouth. Until a detail, no matter how small, opened the door to the secret. And Janice's life, as she knew it, ceased to exist. Bruce arrived at work that morning thinking it would be just another common day. Meeting scheduled, accumulated spreadsheets, and the same bitter coffee from the machine. He was a manager of a small team at an insurance company, and despite the busy routine, he liked his job. He always tried to keep the atmosphere light with the employees, and when time allowed, he would chat with the younger ones to encourage them. He was respected there, both for his competence and for his manners. He was the type of boss who remembered the names of the wives of interns, asked how their studies were going, and offered help when someone seemed discouraged. On this day, Bruce was sitting with one of the newest interns in the team, a guy named Dylan, in his early 20s, a bit shy, but hardworking. It was just a quick chat, the kind that happens between one coffee and another. Bruce asked how he was handling the adaptation, if he needed any guidance, and in the middle of the conversation, dropped a simple sentence, without any intention: "My wife also works with events, goes back and forth all the time, we've been married for 25 years, believe it?" Dylan laughed awkwardly, looked away, and tried to change the subject. That caught Bruce's attention, who insisted, naturally, asking if he was dating someone. That was when the young man said something Bruce would never forget. Dylan hesitated, but then said, in a confessional tone, "I was dating a married woman, but that was some time ago. It was complicated. She said her husband was too busy, a bit cold, she wanted to feel alive again." Bruce furrowed his brow, finding it strange, but not suspecting anything. Then Dylan added, in what seemed like a silly comment, that this woman was over 50, her name was Janice, and she worked organizing corporate events. Bruce froze. An electric current ran through his chest. That could be a coincidence, of course. But the name, the profession, the description. It was impossible to ignore. He looked at Dylan without reacting. Dylan, not realizing the seriousness of what he had said, continued, "She was fun, elegant, full of attitude, but she disappeared suddenly. I think her husband found out or she got tired." Bruce kept his face calm, swallowed hard, and ended the conversation. He stood up, said he had to resolve something urgent, and left the room with a strong heartbeat. That statement seemed absurdly true, but the pieces fitted together with cruel precision. It was like a mirror had fallen to the floor and each shard pointed to a piece of his life that was being destroyed without warning. In the car, on the way home, Bruce tried to convince himself it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe Dylan had confused the name. Maybe he was making things up. But deep down, he already knew. He started remembering situations that before seemed normal and now carried a new weight. The last-minute trips, the meetings that seemed too long, the sudden changes in mood, the excuses she gave to avoid family plans. He had trusted so much that he never questioned anything. Now, his trust turned into a suffocating doubt. When he got home, Bruce entered and called Janice. She was in the bedroom, messing with her phone. When she saw him, she smiled and said she had thought about ordering food later. Bruce looked at her as if he was seeing someone else. He asked directly, "Is there something you need to tell me?" Janice smiled lightly, thinking it was a joke. Bruce repeated the question, more seriously. She replied that she didn't know what he was talking about. That was when he mentioned Dylan's name. He said he had talked to him, that he heard what he told, that he described everything in detail. Janice's smile vanished. She stayed motionless for a few seconds. Tried to change the subject, said she had no idea who Dylan was, that he must have confused things. Bruce just stared. He didn't yell, didn't make a scene, but there was something in his eyes that weighed heavily. Janice, realizing that lying was useless, lowered her head and confessed. Not everything at once, but in pieces, as if trying to measure the damage. Said she had been confused for some time, that she felt invisible, that she needed something different. Bruce listened to each word without interrupting. When she finished, he asked only one question: was it just that guy? Janice hesitated, took a deep breath, and said no. That word sounded like a bullet in his chest. She spoke of the others, vaguely, as if wanting to minimize, but Bruce no longer absorbed the details. What hurt the most was the way she spoke, trying to justify it as if it was part of an inevitable process, as if everything they lived together had naturally worn down, as if he had guilt for having been too constant, too present, too predictable. He listened to everything in silence, then got up and went to the guest room. Closed the door. Spent the night there, lying down, staring at the ceiling. Thought about each birthday they celebrated, the trips they took, the promises exchanged. Thought about the messages he wrote to her, the love notes he left around the house. Thought about their marriage like someone thinking about an old movie, one that ends without warning, with the screen suddenly going black. The next morning, he packed a few clothes, took his documents, and left the house without saying another word. The betrayal, which had been hidden for months, was now a scream echoing in every corner of the house. Bruce didn't have a plan. Didn't know where he would stay, what he would do next. Just knew he couldn't stay there. The house that once represented stability was now the scene of a nightmare. Every corner had too many memories. And he needed to get away before the weight of it all suffocated him completely. While driving aimlessly, he felt the bitter taste of disappointment. He had given his whole life to someone who, at some point, stopped seeing him. And the worst, he didn't even realize when that happened. Bruce spent the first few days staying in a simple hotel. Couldn't sleep well, ate little, avoided calls. Still tried to organize in his mind everything he had heard and seen, but the memories invaded his thoughts in disordered sequence. Janice had broken something inside him that he didn't know how to fix. Still, he kept his composure. Gathered the documents, contacted a lawyer recommended by a coworker, and announced he would file for divorce. He didn't send dramatic messages nor write letters. He was hurt, but determined. What had been between them had ended. And he wanted to get out of that with dignity, even though inside he was in pieces. Meanwhile, Janice seemed not to know what to do with his silence. Sent a few messages asking if he was okay, saying she wanted to talk. Tried to justify it once again, stating she still loved him, that she felt lost, that it all happened unintentionally. Bruce didn't respond. After a week, she stopped insisting. Realized he wouldn't come back. The kids from the couple, Amanda and Charles, found out a few days later. Amanda lived with her fiancé in another city and Charles still shared an apartment with 2 roommates near college. Bruce preferred to tell them in person, but since Janice mentioned it to Amanda during a call, the news reached them by phone. Amanda was shocked. Always thought her parents had the kind of marriage that lasted forever. Tried to understand what had happened, but Janice didn't tell everything. Said only that they were going through a difficult phase and that her father needed some time. Amanda then called Bruce, and although she felt pain talking about the issue, he was honest. Told her that Janice had gotten involved with other people and that, no matter how much it hurt, he couldn't continue the marriage. Charles reacted with more coldness. Always more introspective, observant. Sent a short message to Bruce saying he was on his side. Later, called his mom. The conversation was dry. He didn't say he hated her, but made it clear he was disappointed. Said she destroyed an image he had carried since childhood. Janice tried to argue that things weren't that simple, but Charles ended the call. After that, he spent weeks without speaking to her. The decision about the house was made early in the separation process. Janice told her lawyer that she wanted to keep living there and was willing to buy Bruce's share in the property. She knew he wouldn't want to maintain any connection with that place, and she was right. Bruce agreed, asked only for a fair price for his half, and didn't want to include any emotional negotiations in the middle of it. He just wanted to solve everything quickly and cleanly. His lawyer suggested a more balanced agreement, where both would keep rights over the property for a while, but Janice refused. Wanted to settle it fast and avoid embarrassment. Paid for Bruce's share with part of the couple's savings, keeping the house and the car. Bruce took only his own vehicle, some personal belongings, and the furniture from the old guest room, which he himself disassembled and put in the trunk. There was no fight, argument, or bargaining. It was just the end of something that was already destroyed. Bruce acted calmly, but inside he carried the weight of 25 years turned into memory. And Janice, even though she stayed with the house, felt that whoever was leaving with more dignity was him. The day of the signing of the papers was silent. Both had their lawyers, sitting side by side, without exchanging words. It was strange to see such familiar faces acting like strangers. For almost 3 decades, they shared everything. And now, they barely could look at each other. When the judge confirmed the divorce, Bruce just signed and left. Janice stayed in the room for a few more minutes, as if expecting something to change, as if hoping to hear a different sentence from him. But there was nothing more to say. Bruce rented a small apartment a few kilometers from work. Put a table, a bed, and some photos with the kids. Placed the picture frames containing images with Janice in a box, at the bottom of the closet. The pain was still there, but he needed to create a new routine. On weekends, he started attending hikes, cooking classes, and outdoor activity groups. Needed to stay busy, keep his mind active. During one of those walks, he met Cynthia, a woman who seemed as worn by experiences as he was. Cynthia was a nurse, divorced 2 years ago, and carried the same emotional scar in her eyes that Bruce had in his chest. They started talking about trivial topics, then came the stories of overcoming, disillusionment, forced new beginnings. She told him she discovered her husband's infidelity after seeing a photo of him with another woman on a coworker's gym profile. Said she cried for nights until, one day, she decided to leave home, move to a new city, and try something new. Bruce listened carefully and, for the first time in months, felt he was in front of someone who understood him without judgment. Their meetings became frequent. They had lunch together on Sundays, exchanged books, did groceries together like a normal couple. Bruce still carried remnants of the past, but with Cynthia, that burden seemed lighter. The two began rebuilding their lives side by side, without haste, without forced expectations. He saw himself laughing again, making plans, opening up to new possibilities. Meanwhile, Janice continued in the house where they lived for years, now alone. The kids took time to visit her. She renovated some rooms, tried moving the furniture, bought new curtains, as if an external change could fill the internal void. Dated briefly 2 men she met on apps, but the meetings were shallow. No one knew her story. No one had lived with her long enough to know who she really was. And, deep down, this absence of deep connection with someone started weighing more than she imagined. Everything she had judged as rediscovering herself by giving in to impulsive decisions now seemed a confusing trail of choices. Janice didn't say it aloud, but inside, regret grew. A difficult feeling to admit. It was as if she had broken something very delicate with her own hands, and now observed the shards scattered, unable to fit them back together. And each silence coming from the kids, each cold message, each ignored text from Bruce reinforced what she tried to deny: she had destroyed her own home for something that hadn't even lasted. Bruce, on the other hand, discovered the value of lightness. For the first time in a long time, he felt that he was seen as a complete and worthy person of affection. Not because he was perfect, but because he had resisted. And slowly, the wound opened by the betrayal began to heal with the constant presence of someone who, like him, knew what it was to start over from scratch. Janice spent the first months after the divorce in a state she herself couldn't define. Wasn't sad all the time, nor happy. Felt something closer to disguised emptiness. The house seemed too big, too quiet. Tried to fill that silence with renovations, changing furniture, repainting the living room, buying new paintings. As if, by altering the physical space, she could trick her mind and pretend it was a new chapter. Went out to dinner a few times, reconnected with old friends, joined a dating app and started chatting with some men. It was her way of telling herself that she was still alive, that she hadn't lost charm, that she was still desirable. At first, the conversations flowed. Compliments came easily, promises too. Met a divorced man, went out twice with him. He was pleasant, humorous, but everything sounded superficial. Then came a real estate agent who talked too much and listened little. Then a businessman who only talked about his ex-wife and alimony. None of them reminded her of Bruce. Not that she wanted someone exactly like him, but they all seemed hollow inside. The feeling of being in mechanical dates with strangers who didn't care who she really was started to weigh. Even so, she kept trying. Feared stopping and feeling even more alone. There was a weekend when she traveled alone to a nearby city. Booked a room, did a tourist walk, took some pictures to post on social media. Tried to show the world, and herself, that she was fine. That she was independent, free, full of new possibilities. At night, while having dinner alone in a restaurant, she saw an older couple smiling at each other with unbreakable complicity. The man cut his wife's steak as if it was a natural, everyday gesture. She pretended not to be affected, but when she got to the hotel, she cried for 2 hours straight. It was the first time she cried for Bruce since he left home. That night, the realization hit hard. She had lost someone who truly loved her. And traded that for shallow promises, for moments that didn't leave marks. One night, chatting with Pamela Griggs, an old school friend she still kept in touch with, Janice spilled out. Said she thought she was rediscovering life, but now realized she had just moved away from the only thing that made sense. Told her she missed having someone to share the small joys with, hearing someone laugh in the room next door, having someone worried about whether she had arrived safely. Said Bruce wasn't perfect, but he was genuine. Pamela listened in silence, then held her hand and said something simple: "We only understand the value of stability when the ground disappears." That stayed pounding in Janice's head for days. Slowly, the dates with random men decreased. The initial excitement gave way to emotional fatigue. She started going out less, making fewer excuses for herself. Started feeling ashamed of some messages she had exchanged, of certain behaviors that once seemed liberating. Began to think about the time she wasted looking for something she already had at home. And then came a more painful thought: Bruce had left with pain, but with integrity. She, on the other hand, stayed with the house, the car, and the guilt. It wasn't a fair trade. 3 years after the separation, Janice was doing quick shopping at a pharmacy when the unexpected happened. While picking up medicine from the shelf, she looked to the side and saw Bruce. He was accompanied by an elegant woman and a little girl on his lap, who laughed loudly. The woman was Cynthia, his new wife. The child was his granddaughter, whom Bruce helped take care of. The two seemed at peace, carefree, as if life had taken a full turn and finally placed them in the right place. Janice, instinctively, hid behind the shelf and tried to control her racing heart. Thought she was ready to see Bruce with someone else, but that image tore her apart inside. Seeing his smile, the light way he held the child, the way Cynthia touched his arm with affection, it was a portrait of a life she had thrown away herself. Bruce saw her. Nodded his head, politely. Janice approached and tried to start a conversation. Said she was surprised to see him there. He responded politely, but without enthusiasm. Simply said, "I hope you're well." And turned his attention back to Cynthia. Janice stood there for a few seconds, unsure of what to say. That short and direct sentence said everything. There was no anger, but also no space. It was as if he had closed any chapter where she was still trying to appear. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.